What's up everyone, I'm MMAsherdog and I'm back with another video. Today we are going to take a look at Doug Polk's top 7 biggest hands in online poker. Most of these hands were played heads up back in around 2013 and we are going to find out how he will do in the Daniel Negreanu Doug Polk heads up grudge match going on right now. You would think that Doug is a big favorite, but it has been very competitive so far and both of these guys can definitely win this challenge. Recently, we already reviewed Daniel Negreanu's top 7 biggest hands. Today it's Doug's turn. Something you'll notice immediately if you've seen the video with Daniel is that the pots in this video are a lot bigger and you're going to see some online poker legends like Isildur1 and the Russian Leonardo DiCaprio Trueteller. But before we jump into the action, let me quickly announce that I put together a free training series for you guys that is not only going to show you how to make more money playing poker without studying more, but also it includes 2 recorded coaching sessions with me and 2 students. The training series is super valuable but only available for a limited amount of time, so make sure to check out the link in the description down below. Let's jump right into the action.
We've got this first hand here. We've got WCG Rider, which is Doug Polk, versus the legend Isildur1. So they're playing 400, 800 heads up with a $150 ante. And the fact that there's an ante in there really changes the game. So as you can see, they put in the 150 each. And now it's 400, 800. I don't know whether or not these guys were limping back then. I assume not. Though you can definitely incorporate limps. Isildur goes 3x on the button, which is something he's always liked to do. And Doug Polk goes for a 3-bet. So 12 big blinds, which seems okay. Flop is 10-7-4, and that's a pretty good board for especially Isildur. I mean, WCG is going to improve with a 10 a bunch, sometimes with a 7, not very often with a 4, but he's also just going to have a lot of overcards that miss this board. So he cannot just blindly bet third pot, quarter pot, and move on to the next table. He has to pay attention here. And so he goes for around a 2/3 pot c-bet. And Isildur goes for the raise. A lot of guys play somewhat passively on a board like this, but Isildur's the type of guy that will definitely put you in tough spots. So I also don't mind the raise sizing here. So a pretty strong play by him, assuming obviously the hand makes any sense. WCG calls. I don't imagine him doing a whole lot of re-raising. He definitely has to be afraid of like 10 7s, 4s, 10-7, 7-4 even. Isildur likes to call a lot of 3-bets. Turn is a 5, which definitely improves Isildur's bluffs a little bit. Hands like 8-6 get there, for instance. Hands like 6-3 get there. And if Isildur were bluffing with a hand like 8-5 or 6-5, he has now improved his hand. Makes sense that WCG doesn't have a leading range here, or at least not a very significant one. Isildur bets, so he's still saying, hey, I've got a good hand. Maybe he's doing this with a hand like a 10, especially like a 10 plus a flush draw, but he's mostly representing 2 pair or better at this point. WCG calls. River is a 3, which, hurts WCG a little bit. If Isildur were turning a hand like 6-5 or, hand like 6-4 into a bluff, he just got there. But Isildur can still have bluffs, right? He can have some missed heart draws. He can have like 8-9 or Jack-9 or Jack-8. He can maybe even have some really random hands sometimes. So I expect Isildur to shove all in if he does bet. And he shoves all in for a little bit under pot. So as you can see, Doug is getting 2.13 to 1. So Doug is thinking, well, Isildur can obviously still shove a hand like a set here. He can most likely still shove a hand like 2 pair, but he also has a lot of missed straight draws. So especially if Doug doesn't block any of the straight draws, Isildur could be bluffing quite a bit. Would be quite a boring hand if Doug now folded. Doug shows no fear and calls, and he shows out with aces here, and what does Isildur have? 8-9 offsuit, wow. Alright, so Isildur called with 8-9 off pre-flop, which is not terrible, but it is a very loose play. He probably expects Doug to 3-bet a very wide range, and especially deep stack where he has a lot of playability. He thinks he can profitably call. He raised the flop, which is definitely a fine play. It's cool to have some raises on a good board for you. And in the end, he tripled off. It's a fine play. Obviously, you have to be careful not to always do this with like 8-9, Jack-9, flush draws, whatnot. So as long as you don't overbluff this spot by picking too many of these random combinations, it's a great play. I do think Isildur can still shove a hand like 2 pair for value here. And Doug shows up with aces. I think his play is very reasonable. Obviously, you want to 3-bet pre-flop. The flop, you could actually check and trap sometimes, but betting is the standard play, and he's obviously not folding to a raise. On the turn, it is a shitty spot. You could now be behind against a hand like 8-6, in fact, you're dead, or even a hand like 4-5, or, the flop sets like 7s, 4s, and even 10s. And on the river, Doug is probably thinking, hey, Isildur is repping a 6. How does he have a 6 here, right? Maybe he was bluff raising the flop with hand like 6-5, and, he didn't believe he was good on the turn, so he turned it into a bluff, and now he got there, right? And he can still have a couple of hands like 2 pairs and sets, as I mentioned, but his value range is pretty damn thin here. So since I have aces, I don't block any of my opponent's bluffs. I think it's pretty likely he's bluffing, especially against a boss like Isildur, who's capable of making big bluffs when deep stacked. I think I can call here. I think Doug's play is absolutely correct. I don't think he should be folding. Yes, he has a bluff catcher. There's a chance that Isildur has a hand like ace-10 or king-10 on the flop or on the turn even, but I don't think he would shove the river. So I think Doug's play was great. I'll give him a 9 out of 10. And Isildur's play, it's a little bit on the loose side, but I do like it. He showed a lot of hard deep stack, which is very important in heads up, so I'll give him an 8 out of 10. Next hand, we've got Isildur against WCG Rider again. WCG also open raised to 3x, in fact. So he's going to 3-bet aggressively, therefore Doug will 4-bet aggressively, and therefore Isildur is going to not fold a whole lot. I don't really like Doug sizing too much. I think he should size up a little bit. I mean, it's not terrible by any means, but he should probably go a little bit larger, especially being so deep and with the ante out there, giving Isildur an even better price. He should add a little bit on top. Understandably, Isildur calls. I wouldn't be surprised if Isildur called with a pretty weak hand here. Pot is already $43,500. It's pretty sick. And Doug goes for a small bet, which makes a lot of sense. If Isildur has a flush, you want to control the size of the pot. And, if Isildur has a hand like Jack 9 of hearts, he's got absolutely nothing anyway. There's not a whole lot of protection needed, I guess. Isildur doesn't have a whole lot of, Queen 9 offsuit with 1 club hands, right? Yeah, he's going to have hands like, Ace Queen or something like that with a club, and maybe some slightly weaker hands like King Queen, King Jack, but he's mostly going to have suited hands. Or, pairs and whatnot. So Isildur ends up shoving huge here. I really don't like that play. I really don't like that play. Can you have a check raising range here? Yeah, you can have some check raises, but why so large, right? You're making it very easy for Doug. If Doug has a flush, he just snap calls. If he has pocket tens, he snap calls. If he has any decent hand, you're giving him an easy fold, right? Imagine Doug has a hand like whatever, king 10 offsuit with no club. You can easily make him fold. If you check raise a bit smaller, now you put him in a tough spot. So yeah, he's kind of giving Doug an easy way out. So making it infinitely large is not always the best play. So I'm guessing Isildur here actually has something like, he might have hand like ace 10 suited, but he also could just have the ace of clubs, right? And he's just hoping for Doug to fold. Isildur has pocket tens, interesting, and Doug has ace king clubs. Okay. So Isildur 3-bets, absolutely standard. He calls the 4-bet, absolutely standard. With an insanely aggressive dynamic, maybe you could 5-bet, but calling is the standard play. Let's be real. And then he check raised the flop. I mean, it's okay to check raise the flop. However, you should not shove all in, because as I said, if Doug had a decent hand, you can just fold. But if he has a hand like this, he just, clicks call and calls his girlfriend and says, "Baby, we made it. We're gonna be rich." So obviously this is a cooler spot, Doug just flopped the nuts. If Doug wanted to check back, this would be a cool hand to do it with. Your hand is almost too good, right? So unless Isildur has a hand like 6, 7 clubs or a hand like pocket tens, you're not getting a whole lot of action, I guess. So he could have decided to check behind, but, he bet small, which is fine, and, he obviously set the trap and got the maximum. I have to give Isildur a 4.5 out of 10. Everything was perfect until the flop, and then that check raiser was a bit much. And, Doug 4-bet pre, standard. He bet the flop small, fine, and obviously he called. So I'll give Doug a 9 out of 10. He should have 4-bet a little bit larger in my mind. But other than that, betting is fine, and obviously calling with the shove is the standard play. All right, we're moving down in stakes. Doug's probably had a downswing. It's 200, 400, non-ante. Doug goes for a slightly smaller raise this time, but there is no ante. That's significant. Fine raise size. Dino decides to 3-bet to 12 big blinds. And this time, it's kind of funny, right? This time, Doug actually goes for a much larger 4-bet. I mean, they are still deep like they were in the last hand, but this time there's no ante out there. Okay? So, Doug 4-bets, and, you know, he doesn't necessarily need aces here, even though he's 500 big blinds deep. You know, Dino's still going to 3-bet like 20+% of the time, right? So, against that range, you don't need aces to 4-bet. Doug shoves all in here. I mean, it's okay, but you probably could have some type of clickback. What he might even be trying to do, I mean, it's kind of tough to make it like somewhere in the 60s, right? You know, can you really sell the fact that you have a bluff there? That you have a hand like ace-jack offsuit there? That is pretty tough sell. So maybe by shoving, I mean, maybe Doug shoves everything here and he doesn't re-raise at all. So he will have aces, but he'll also have maybe a hand like kings or ace-king. I would imagine he often just calls a hand like that, though. So when he shoves here, I do suspect he just only has aces. But maybe not. I mean, maybe shows up with the ace-5 suited or the ace-jack offsuit. Who knows, right? Dino has kings, okay. Doug has aces. So is this a cooler? I mean, Dino King is very aggressive, which means that Doug is going to be very aggressive. So even though it's 500 big blinds, they are playing heads up, you know. So, but I do think that Doug probably only shoves aces here, to be honest. So, but then again, doesn't matter. You know, if Doug only shoves aces, but Dino calls kings, maybe queens or ace king suited, doesn't matter, right? So what Doug could have also done is trapped pre-flop, you know, once he faces the 37K re-raise. So especially if he believes that Dino might 5-bet here with a really bad hand. Or not a bad hand, but not necessarily a great hand. So, yeah, calling would have been fine. Clickback would have been fine. Shoving is a little bit much, but I definitely understand his play. And I don't see Dino folding a hand like kings, to be honest. Which he didn't. So it's really hard to rate this hand, given that it's a pre-flop all-in. I'll give them both an 8 out of 10. So let's do the next hand. Open and a call this time, so this is going to be some sick flop, I imagine. Okay, this is a sick looking flop because I could definitely see some type of, 5-3 versus 8-5 situation here. Isildur ends up betting 4K. Most people tend to bet a little bit smaller on a board like this, but it's fine. Doug decides to call. That definitely removes a lot of Doug's straights. Not all of them. He's going to slow play them sometimes, but definitely removes a bunch of them. V5 is, pretty good for both guys. I could easily see Doug calling with a 5 or like a 5 plus a pair. I could see Isildur bluffing with a 5. So he ends up betting somewhere close to pot. I probably would have bet a little bit on the smaller side, but Doug still decides to check raise. So when he check raises here, he can definitely get himself in a tough spot, right? Because, when Isildur bets the flop and bets the turn, I think he has almost every 8-5. When Doug only calls pre-flop, I think, and only calls the flop, I think he definitely eliminates some of them. So Doug has to be careful to not run into just 8-5 here. And now you're in a shitty spot because when Isildur shoves, I imagine him shoving in like 8-5, thinking, well, Doug is not going to love it, but he's not going to fold with a 5. And as you can tell, they're putting in a lot of money here. Wow. Okay, so Doug actually does have the 8-5, so he called pre-standard, and he actually check called the flop, which is not standard. You should definitely check raise this hand the vast majority of the time. So, as we said before, Doug can have this hand, right? He's just not going to have it as often as Isildur would. And Isildur actually had the free roll 8-5, but he didn't get there. So, I'll give Isildur, I'll give him an 8.5 out of 10. I'll give Doug a 7.5 out of 10. So, yeah, pretty cool play. Let's do the next hand. We've got RHGJE. I think that was for Haley back in the day. Dino King will Hasha folds, and WCG Rider 3-bets. Otherwise, it would be a pretty boring hand. And RHGJE ends up 4-betting here. Definitely makes sense. Sizing is pretty cool, too. Doug ends up 5-betting here. You can have a 5-betting range. We are, nearly 250 big blinds deep. So it makes sense to have a 5-bet range. Again, I do expect Doug's range to potentially be only aces, but maybe not. Flop is Jack 6-4, Jack 6 deuce, which shouldn't change things. So I can see Doug still betting aggressively. So I'm pretty surprised he ends up checking here. When RHG bets small here, I think he's value protection betting a lot of, good pairs. RHG ends up calling. I swear I don't know what they have. Doug has 8-7 of hearts, and RHG has queens. Okay. All right. So what do I think of the 3-bet pre by Doug? Good. What do I think of the 5-bet? I don't like it. I mean, the thing is, when you're 5-bet very deep, you at least want to have a big card in your hand, right? So you make it less likely that RHGJE has a hand like aces or kings or queens. So yeah, I like the 3-bet. I would like a call against a 4-bet. I hate a 5-bet. And it actually worked out okay. Actually flopped the flush draw. I think Doug should have just ended up betting here. I think Doug should have just bet the flop. And then he check raised, which is like, okay, you can definitely get it in badly against a hand like ace, king of hearts, for instance. I would have liked the bet. So I'll give him a 4 out. RHJE, the 4-bet with queens, he can definitely end up calling, but I don't blame him. Against the 5-bet, I thought Doug may just only have aces. Boy, was I wrong. So, in this aggressive dynamic, I would definitely, go on and 4-bet and call a 5-bet. And then he calls the check raise all in, which is very close, right? Because Doug can have aces, he can have kings. And then occasionally he will have a hand like 8-7 of hearts, or a hand like maybe like ace, king of hearts. But I wouldn't even be shocked if you can end up bet folding a hand like this. So I'll give RSJE an 8 out of 10. So, yeah, interesting hand. Different session this time. We've got Malaysia, who's Paul Fua. He raises the 2.5 blinds. Doug ends up 3-betting, which is going to be his most common play, other than folding, of course. And so we've got Trueteller, we've got Tight Man, who is Christoph Vogelsang, but he folds, being tight. And Malaysia ends up 4-betting, quite large, in fact. I would have liked maybe, it's fine, actually. They're super deep. I don't mind it. So Doug is going to do a lot of calling. The pot is 51K basically, and they have 340K behind. This is a great flop for Doug. I imagine he calls here with jacks pre-flop to the 4-bet with queens, maybe queen jack suited. So yeah, this is a very good run out for him so far. The board is very dry, so I could see Doug slow playing a hand that good. A hand like queens or jacks. I think Doug is more likely to have 10-9 suited than Malaysia, but Malaysia doesn't care, so he ends up betting again. Much better for Doug. I could definitely see Doug having a hand like queen 10, king queen, ace queen. So Malaysia definitely has to be careful here. So he actually goes for the small bets back in like 2014 or whatever it was. So, the modern day block bet. This is how it started, guys. The modern day block bet. Doug ends up calling. Okay. So I could even see Doug calling a hand like king queen suited here, ace queen suited, queen 10 suited, thinking, well, I probably have the best hand, but I could still lose, and I don't see myself getting called by worse much. So Malaysia has aces, and Doug has ace queen suited. So, wow. Okay. So Malaysia 4-bet pre, absolutely standard. But then I think on all 3 streets, he definitely could have considered checking. I think he doesn't really realize how good this run out is for Doug. The fact that Doug can have like trips, or at least he could have had queens, now quad queens, jacks, 10-9 suited, pocket eights, probably not, but who knows, right? So yeah, and Doug is just doing much better here. So yeah, I'll give Malaysia like I'll give him like a 5 out of 10. I'll give Doug 3-bet pre is good. Calling the 4-bet is absolutely standard. Calling flop and turn standard on the river. I think Doug should have shoved. I think Doug probably should have shoved. So I'll give Doug an 8.5 out of 10. I think everything was standard except for the river where you could have considered shoving. If you tell me, hey, Malaysia definitely plays jacks this way, maybe pocket eights 10 unsuited, then, you'd probably give him a 10. So cool hand. All right, and we've gotten to the last hand. 400, 800 with an ante. As you can tell, there's 900 in there already, so there's a lot more money to play for, so everybody's going to loosen up a lot. Doug goes for the same 3-bet sizing, and this time Malaysia calls. This 7-7-4 board is kind of dry. I don't really see Doug having 4s, but I could see him have some hands like ace-7 suited or 7-6 suited. I could see Malaysia having hands like 4s and a couple more 7s. Doug bets small, which is okay. And Malaysia again goes for the really sick small check raise. Very advanced play. This is actually pretty cool. Doug is not really going to do much re-raising here. Such a dry board where he could easily be crushed against trips or a full house. Turn is a deuce, which shouldn't really change anything. I guess it's remotely possible Malaysia has deuces, but come on. He bets 3/4 pot, so when he bets like this, I could still see him having a pair that's not trips. So it makes a lot of sense for Doug to call, but not do a lot of raising. The 8 changes things quite a bit. I could maybe see both guys having pocket 8s. I could definitely see both of them having 5-6 suited. So now all of a sudden, I mean, Malaysia bets big when, you know, the draws get there, pocket 8s get there. I could see him bluffing with like ace-5 suited or ace-3, clubs, maybe some kind of overcards. I think Malaysia probably has it here. You know, I mean, he just barreled off on a dry board, everything got there, and, you know, he still bets big. So I imagine he probably has something good. But then again, Doug says he got something really good. So what is Doug repping, right? Doug is repping a hand like 7-8 suited, pocket 8s, maybe pocket 4s. Maybe he's bluff raising here with a hand like whatever, a 4. So Malaysia does have a 7, okay? Prediction correct for once. And Doug has 5-6. So this time he did go for the thinner value raise. Okay. So I'll give Malaysia 7.5 out of 10. I'll give him an 8 out of 10. I'll give Doug, I mean, I like the 3-bet. I like the check raise. I like calling the check raise. I like calling the turn. On the river, Malaysia basically has to call you with a hand like, you know, 7-6 or a hand like jacks or queens. So given the fact that it's only basically a min raise, I actually don't mind this play. So basically, Doug is thinking Malaysia has a decent amount of 7s, right? Like a7, king7, 6-7, 5-7, maybe like looser like 10-7. And, you know, he will have full houses, but he thinks he's getting called by many worse hands compared to better hands. So I don't mind this min raise. I'll give Doug a 9.5 out of 10. So that's a strong one to end the video on. Make sure to comment down below and let us know what you think of these hands. Did they play them badly? Did they play them very well? Please tell us what you think.
All right, guys and girls, that has been it for me. What do you think about these hands? Let me know in the comments down below. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on future episodes. Also, make sure to grab my brand new free training series that would help you make more money playing poker without studying more before it expires. You will find the link in the description down below. See you next time, and thanks for watching.